Welcome. And I would ask to please have you turn off cell phones and other electronic devices. We are pleased to welcome you here today on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association. We are very much interested in hearing what the President and his delegation of the National Coalition of Syrian Revolution and Opposition Forces has to tell us. Syria has been in a conflict for over 4 years and has suffered. Mr. al-Bahra will be heading the delegation, which includes the 3 panelists as well as more of the delegation, to the 69th session of the General Assembly, and will raise the need for a comprehensive international effort to tackle the causes and consequences of the crisis in Syria. First, let me introduce you in a quick second, and there will be quite a bit of time for questions and answers, to President Hadi al-Bahra. He is president of the Syrian Opposition Coalition. He was the Syrian Opposition Coalition's chief negotiator in Geneva, secretary of the coalition's political committee, and advisor to former Syrian Coalition President Ahmad al-Jarba, who many of you met here last year and the year before. He was born in the Syrian capital, Damascus, and received a bachelor's degree from Wichita State University in Kansas. Has a long career in media, and we welcome you here today. We also have the Vice President, Abdul Hakim Bashar, the head of the Kurdish National Council. He studied in Damascus University and graduated as a pediatrician. He served as secretary for the Syrian Kurdish Democratic Party, and he is the founding member of the Damascus delegation. We also have with us Ms. Alia Mansour, who is on the political committee of the Syrian Coalition. She is a member of the Syrian Coalition's political committee and serves as the committee's coordinator for Lebanon, Iraq, and Jordan. She is the former member of the General Secretariat of the Syrian National Council. I welcome you all here today, and I will have the President al-Bahra begin his talk. I wanted to take the chair's prerogative, so to speak, on the first question. Why don't you speak first, and then we'll put you to some questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. I would like just to give a brief about the situation that may answer many of your questions. The world faces a grave threat from the extremist group ISIL. It's a global threat that has spilled out from Syria to Iraq, the region, and the world. It poses a significant domestic security risk to the US and to the West. It must be tackled and must be tackled in Syria. This is the #1 issue at the UN General Assembly this year and is the focus of my trip and meeting this week. But this extremism is not a phenomenon. Syrians have endured the horror perpetrated by ISIS for more than a year. That, in addition to the 3.5 years of unparalleled brutality at the hands of the Assad regime itself. We and our affiliated armed groups on the ground, the Free Syrian Army, have been fighting terror on 2 fronts, ISIS and the regime at the same time, with very little help from the international community. Since the start of this year, we started our fight against ISIS. The Free Syrian Army started its fight against ISIS from the first quarter of this year. The opposition coalition has announced its position from ISIS from September 2013, a year ago, while nobody in the international community had a clear position on ISIS at that time. For us, we continue our fight. We were successful in pushing them back from major northern cities in Syria, from Arret Na'man and from Idlib area, from Aleppo, and most recently, 2 months ago, from the suburb of Damascus, especially from eastern Ghouta area. But no army can sustain a fight on two fronts indefinitely without support. I have come to New York on behalf of all Syrians to convey a message. To defeat ISIS, the international community must join our fight. But we want them to understand that it is their fight too. They must work with us. They are the only inclusive, moderate, political group in Syria on a coordinated approach to defeat ISIS militarily, remove its root cause, the Assad regime itself, and put in place the moderate governance that will ensure there can be no resurgence of extremism. I am encouraging our partners in the international community to work with us on a systematic and comprehensive approach. First, military defeat of ISIS everywhere. We must begin airstrikes in Syria immediately, as we speak. Hundreds of thousands of civilians in northern Syria, in Kobani area, Ain al-Arab area, are trapped in brutal siege by ISIS. Time is of essence to avert catastrophe. We are ready to coordinate with our allies to maximize the impact of airstrikes against ISIS. Hitting them in Iraq alone will not work if they can continue to operate, regroup, train, and plan inside Syria. Every day that passes without airstrikes in Syria allow ISIL the opportunity for more growth and more terror. Second, strengthen our moderate forces on the ground. We share the same goals, values. We have already been fighting ISIS with some success, but we need help, training, and more sophisticated weapon systems. Our forces are the best way to avoid US and any foreign boots on the ground. Nobody wants that. Third, the Assad regime is the root cause of extremism, so it has to be defeated alongside ISIS. The regime brutality, repression, lawlessness created conditions in which the extremism flourish. Further, its deliberate policies of releasing extremist leaders from jail, opening its border with Iraq, and buying oil from ISIS itself have helped the threat grow. We will continue to lead the fight against the regime on the ground. I urge our international partners to help us. By increasing the pressure on the regime, it is compelled to accept the internationally agreed political transition it has rejected previously in Geneva talks. More effective sanctions against the regime and its backers and efforts to disrupt Iranian weapons and fuel supplies. We cannot win this fight through airstrikes alone, weapons and training alone. They won't defeat the threat for good. For that, there must be moderate Syrian governance to ensure extremism and its roots causes cannot return. But to govern, we need protection from the regime's aerial bombardment in areas controlled, either by supplying sophisticated weapon system, air defense system, or by imposing a limited no-fly zone. The Syrian National Coalition is the moderate, inclusive, and democratic answer. We are asking the international community to join our coalition against the two forces terrorizing Syria, the Assad regime and ISIS. Thank you.
Thank you very much, President al-Bahra. My question to you is that you met with President Obama a few months ago, And as a result of that, President Obama put forward a training outside the country of vetted moderate rebels. Are you part of the vetting process, and how will that work? Thank you.
Actually, previously, the vetting process was set without any Syrian part involvement. And this was one major defect in the program itself. We are here to consult with each other, with the American administration, about the new vetting process, which Syrian has to play a big part of it, alongside with the rest of the international coalition.
Thank you very much. The floor is open to questions. I know you, but if you would also say your name and your affiliation.
I wanted to ask can I ask in Arabic?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, my name is Ali Barada from An-Nahar newspaper and from France 24. سؤالي باللغة العربية لكم هو أن منذ أكثر من 3 سنوات مجلس الأمن يحاول أن يتدخل بشكل أو بآخر لإنهاء هذه الأزمة في سوريا، ولكن وقفت روسيا دائما عائقا دون تحقيق هذه الغاية. ومن الواضح أيضا أنكم عاجزون كنتم طوال الفترة الماضية عن إلحاق الهزيمة بقوات القوات النظامية السورية، فكيف أنتم أيضا تريدون هزيمة هذا النظام وبالإضافة إلى داعش في نفس الوقت؟ ما هي خطتكم للمستقبل إذا كنتم تريدون تحقيق هذين الهدفين؟ شكرا.
Should I answer in Arabic or in
English and Arabic.
No, but what is the point? It's not television.
He's asking that for a long time, for more than 3 years, we are trying to fight the regime alone, and we couldn't beat and win the regime. We were trying to negotiate that the Russian will not block any resolution at the Security Council. So how would we expect that our forces would win a battle against 2 fronts at the same time? The answer, I'll put your question in a different way. I will ask you. First, I will say the regime couldn't defeat our forces for 3.5 years. This is the 4th year. The regime could not get the will of the Syrian people to wind down and accept any thing but to win back their freedom and to rewrite their constitutional right and win back their human rights. So the people of Syria have the will and the power, and they will continue their fight until they win on both fronts. It's a matter of time and sacrifice. We are asking the international community to join us now because it's no longer Syrian issue or Syrian problem. Now it's regional and spilling even internationally. Now you have the foreign fighters coming from Europe, from the States, from everywhere in the world. These all created a special condition where you have a more sophisticated organization than Al-Qaeda itself, which is ISIS, and really with the option of building a new state, a terror state, to expand all over the world. We have fought ISIS since the 1st quarter of this year. We won in many battles in Idlib area, Ma'arrat al-Na'man, we kicked them completely out, even with our weak and very weak assistance and support from international community. Recently, we drove them out of Damascus suburb area completely. The politics is not a stable issue. Everything changes according to conditions on the ground, to the international community, to existing threats. So I don't expect that the Russian could stay on the same position for a long time. Thank you.
All right, thank you. There was a question first, column, and then we'll come back.
No, it wasn't me.
All right.
So, Ra'ad Faqih from Al Jazeera. Some observers believe that accepting the help from the West countries might create new challenges to the moderate Syrian opposition in Syria. I'm talking about the relation with Jabhat al-Nusra and some other Islamist groups. How would you deal with these challenges?
I think
And if we can have the answer also in Arabic, that would be great. Thanks.
هجاوبك بالعربي. أول شيء بالتأكيد أنت عندك إنه الشعب في سوريا هو شعب وسطي، لم يكن شعب متطرف في أي مرحلة من تاريخه. يعني تاخذ التاريخ السوري من الأول، الشعب شعب مسلم وسطي منفتح متعايش بكل مكوناته وأطيافه. هي طبيعة شعبنا. التطرف هو شيء قدم أولا عبر الحدود، ثم أسس له جذور في داخل سوريا لمعطيات خاصة ولظروف الدعم والاحتياجات الشعب، أمور معقدة ومترابطة مع بعضها. الآيسيس اللي هي داعش هي تنظيم غالبية أعضائهم غير السوريين، ولذلك لا يوجد حاضنة شعبية لها في سوريا. عندما تذهب المسببات الرئيسية لوجودها، ولا سيما النظام الذي ساعد على إنشائها وساعد على توسع نشاطها وساعد أن تكون منظمة قوية وينتشر خطرها من سوريا إلى الإقليم بشكل عام، عندما يزول هذا السبب ستبدأ فكرة التطرف بالزوال. بالنسبة لنا نحن الجبهة الإسلامية، إذا كنت أنت بتقصد كمثال، الجبهة الإسلامية أعادت مراجعة مواقفها وأصدرت بيان منذ فترة قريبة اعترفت فيه بضرورة أن يكون الشعب حرا في اختيار وتحديد نظامه السياسي في المستقبل بعد تحقيق إما حل سياسي أو سقوط النظام نفسه. التطرف الجميع يرفضه من أي جهة كانت. الحد الفاصل هو كل تنظيم مسلح داخل سوريا يحاول فرض عقيدته أو أي برنامج سياسي على الشعب السوري باستخدام السلاح والقوة هو تنظيم ليس من الثورة السورية. الثورة السورية كل من حمل السلاح حمل دفاعا عن النفس وسعيا لتحقيق تطلعات الشعب السوري للحرية والديمقراطية وليس لأي برامج خاصة أخرى. In English, I said that the cutting line edge in Syria between definition which organization is extremist, which is acceptable and not acceptable, and in armed opposition. Any group which try to enforce its ideology, beliefs, or religious targets on the Syrian people using arms and power is not acceptable. They are not serving the main purposes of the revolution itself. The Syrian society, it's a moderate society. It never had extremism in its history. If we go centuries in the back until now, we find Syrian people are moderate Muslim people who lived with all other sects and minorities in Syria peacefully since centuries ago. To prove the point, Syria has the only population which speaks the language of Jesus until today. These are the Christians of Syria. You have the Christian heritage in Syria, preserved and kept. So I don't see any issue in this.
All right, there's a question here, and then we'll go to Stefano and Evelyn.
Sir, do you have
Would
any...
you just introduce yourself?
Sorry, Zena Karam from the Associated Press. Do you have any guarantees, or do you really trust that this new push to arm the rebels in Syria can really make a difference to help them fight on both fronts? And if I can ask a question, are you also asking for weapons for the Kurdish fighters in Syria, seeing what is happening now in the north?
The way we see it in Syria, that we are all Syrians. It's not an issue of Kurdish and Arab or other sects of Syria. The coalition itself, it represents all Syrians, sects from all parts. The National Kurdish Council is part of the coalition itself. So they will not, we will not go after making militias based on any ethnic or background or religious background. It would be complete national fighting force from all sects, all types of Syrian society. The program of equipped and trained, sure, it will make a huge difference because it will provide military assistance, proper type of arms needed, plus it provide proper training, and it will provide for us to reconstruct the Free Syrian Army in the proper way.
Thank you. Evelyn?
Thanks, Pam. Evelyn Leopold, Huffington Post contributor. Can you expand on Russia's role? Can you ever envisage, if the United States did conduct airstrikes, of coming into having a clash with Russia?
I don't think that Russia would get itself involved in military terms in the region or inside Syria. Russia made it clear the last time when we had the chemical attack on the civilians in Damascus, and when President Obama issued his warning to the regime that they will hit his facilities. Russia announced at that time that they are not ready to interfere militarily for anyone, including Assad regime.
All right, thank you. Colin, since you're right here also, and then, while we have the mic, Stefano.
Thank you.
And then we'll come back.
I think having a deja vu, because last year we were exactly, actually now we're worse, because when he had the position was saying like, because I asked the same question that was asked before, it's like between the two enemies, you know, which one you choose, and you say no, we have to fight both. Now we are in a situation that even worse, because ISIL at that time was, I remember, the extremists or something, they were called different. But my question is this. The Security Council just a few days ago, Secretary of State Kerry said that he welcomed if Iran can help, he's open to the help of Iran. The Italian Foreign Minister Mogherini was even more explicit. She said you cannot, and I repeat, you cannot resolve the situation, and she was not mentioning about Iraq, she was referring to Syria, without having Iran. Having Iran looks like probably a situation where you have to choose. And the question is, are you concerned that United States, when it has to, maybe you don't decide, but maybe what if the United States decide between the two enemies, it will decide one and you still fight? Are you not concerned that you will be in a situation where you'll be really alone?
I think when we started our revolution and quest for democracy and freedom, we did not take permission from anyone in the world. We knew that we'll fight our own war, we'll seek our own freedom, and retain back our dignity. So we are not waiting, we did not wait before, and we are not waiting now, and we are not afraid of being alone. The current threat is an international and regional threat. We are the front line against this threat. So it's a choice for the free world. Either you wait until they reach your land, or you join us and join our coalition in this fight. Regarding Iran, I agree with the Italian minister 100%. The international community has to put pressure on Iran completely to stop its role in killing the Syrian people and participating in the committing crimes against the humanities against the Syrian people. The military advisors beside Assad are from Iran. The National Revolutionary Guard inside Syria advisors also from Iran. The sectarian militias and volunteers coming from Iran to participate with the Assad gangs in killing the Syrian people. So for sure, Syrian crisis cannot be solved if we don't put an end to the participation of Iran in its really negative role, which will be accounted for all the crimes committed against the Syrian people.
Thank you very much. Colin?
Hello. Hi, Colin Lynch from Foreign Policy Magazine. Just a quick follow on that. I mean, the U.S. has kind of been dancing around this whole question of to what degree it will cooperate with the Iranians, both in Iraq and potentially in Syria. And it's, I mean, can you give us an indication of what you think it would be unwise for the Americans to coordinate in any way with the Iranians? and also in the broader fight on ISIS, and also on the train and equip program. Can you flesh out for us what's going on, and what that's new, what's happening in Syria, what's going to be preserved, if anything, in Jordan, or there are any other countries that are stepping up that will provide this kind of training role? Thanks.
Sure, thank you. Regarding Iran, I think I answered a big part of this question. You cannot solve the Syrian crisis without letting Iran go along with the international community. It has to stop its negative role, its participation in killing the Syrian people. Iran cannot make itself as an intermediary or part of the team which making peace. It's part which an ally of the Assad regime itself. It's a partner with the regime. So actually Iran represented, whether you put it clearly or it's already with it's one side. The regime and Iran are one side. So when you are talking to the regime, you are talking to Iran. When you are talking to Iran, you are talking to the regime. But you have to put them in the right spot. They are partners right now in the killing of the Syrian people. Regarding the train and equip program, right now I think that we are doing a lot of consultation about the strategy that should be followed, the plan of implementation. These consultations are among the coalition members from the international community, and we are here also to let them hear our vision on how we see it best planned inside Syria and how it should be inclusive. It's not a military issue alone. It's not about air raids alone. It is about total program which has military, it has economical, it has social and political paths which has to go simultaneously at the same time in order to defeat terrorism and extremism and its root also Assad regime.
All right, and there's a comment here, and if maybe at one point you can introduce the other members of the delegation.
Yeah, sure.
Hello, my name is Mark Langfan from Eric Sheva. I sort of have two questions. My first question is, how are you reaching out to the non-Sunni parts of Syria to allay their concerns that if Assad fell, that you would be as inclusive of them? The second question is on the partnership with Iran and Assad. Secretary of State Kerry had mentioned that Assad maybe have violated the Chemical Weapons Convention. But if it is really a partnership between Assad and Iran, do you believe that that then could very well invoke the 1925 Geneva Protocol and take it out of the civil war exclusion that might give Assad protection and in effect give Iran war crime liability under the Geneva 1925 Protocol?
I think it's an issue of taking the Geneva Convention, and plus you have a Security Council Resolution 2118, which clearly in its clause 21 state clearly if the Assad regime transport or use the chemical war after the implementation of this agreement, he would be in breach of this agreement and should be brought back to the Security Council meeting at their clause 7. But it always goes back to the political will of the international community to apply and implement whatever resolutions they take.
Thank you. Melody?
Hi.
Right back here.
I'm Sonja Mogy with CNN. I understand you had a meeting with Saudi Arabia yesterday. Can you speak a little bit about the plan or talks about any assistance from Saudi Arabia? They had also met with Iran as well. So are you looking at them as some sort of an ally to help fight this problem?
Saudi Arabia from the start of the Syrian revolution stood beside the Syrian people. And currently they are also part of leading partner in the fight against terrorism in the world and in the region. They have their own vision about the strategy that should be implemented. They are ready to contribute to it. They are providing help and assistance to the Syrian people, to the coalition. They have their own worries. They want to make sure that terrorism dealt with from its root causes and not only from its symptoms.
There's a question right here.
Razi Canikligil, Turkey's Hürriyet newspaper. Can you talk about Turkey's role? Captive diplomats are released. Do you think it's going to make any change? And also, earlier you talked about limited fly zone. Turkey also suggested. Do you think it's going to be a sanctuary for the ISIS also? I mean, can you describe more about this no-fly zone?
Everybody needs to understand that the threat of terrorist organization really it goes in danger according to the proximity from its source and center, which is Syria and Iraq. Turkey shares large border, long border with both countries. So for sure, as much ISIS expand, it's more danger to Turkey. But Turkey has a dilemma. The dilemma how to balance between its humanitarian commitment to let Syrian refugees in and out from their borderline, to provide them with the humanitarian assistance, or to have a strict security control on the border, which will risk the humanitarian side of obligation. Turkey always chose to have more on the humanitarian side than the security side. So always it's sacrificing the security for the humanitarian side. Previously also Turkey had the hostages in Iraq, which made its position also difficult. I have no doubt that Turkey at the end and now and previously is against terrorism, extremism in the area. Turkey has a permanent role to play in joining this coalition and providing all the help it can, and I think Turkey already providing a lot of assistance to the Syrian people, to the coalition, and to the Free Syrian Army, which is the arm which is fighting terrorism and terrorist organization inside Syria.
Thank you, Karim, and then Ragida. Then we'll come back around Jim.
Oh, okay. My name is Salim from Al-Quds Al-Arabi, London. I have two questions. The first question is, what are your short-term goals during this week at the General Assembly? What are you, I mean, we understand what your long-term goals are, but what are some of the short-term goals that you are hoping to achieve throughout this week? And my second question is, what are your comments regarding the children who were killed by human error with the immunization shots last week? Thank you.
Sure. This visit, as I stated in my opening statement, mainly to explain to the world at large and to the American administration our vision, strategy, and proposed strategy and plan on how to counter terrorism and how we should deal with its root causes. We cannot eliminate terrorism only, as I said, by military operations. It has to be coupled with complete program. So we are explaining this strategy. We are insisting and explaining on the urgency of the catastrophe right now going on. In 2 days, ISIL has invaded more than 200 villages, Kurdish villages inside Syria. 300 villages completely being emptied. In 1 day flow, 130,000 refugees, just like a wave, came to Turkey. Nobody thought how much weight and obligation put on Turkey side. This number now growing close to 200,000. So the situation you cannot sit and wait. You need to act urgently, you need to start work on the ground, but you have to do it the correct way in order to be fruitful. Regarding the immunization problem, this is a great catastrophe. I feel really sorry about it. I send my condolences to the families and the victims of this incident. All investigation until now, the first part of the investigation was carried out by the interim government itself. It goes in direction of human errors of the people who did carry on the immunization. Even one of them, he did immunization shot to his own son who got killed. But this is also clearly, it put that the government, the interim government, the health ministry did not have enough quality assurance program. It doesn't make sure that there will not be a mix in medication and the type used. So for sure, now we have a second investigation committee to look into the investigation of the government. By the end of this week, we'll have a final picture, clear picture of the situation, and we will hold people accountable.
Thank you. Karim?
Karim Lebourg from Radio France International. I'd like to know exactly how much territory do you control on the ground in Syria at the moment? And can you expect to be a legitimate representative of the Syrian people if you don't control a large part of the territory?
We control 100% of the Syrian land because we are the people of Syria and we live in Syria, our people in Syria. It's not a matter of invading force and somebody inside, people fighting against foreign force. It's the people who inspire to freedom and to achieve democracy. So even if this area is controlled today by the by Assad regime, the next day it will be controlled by the opposition. It's a dynamic solution. As we speak now, you heard in the past week that there were major advances of the Free Syrian Army towards the capital itself, Damascus. They are around 2 kilometers away from the eastern gate, famous eastern gate of the city. So Free Syrian Army exists inside Damascus itself, in the suburb of Damascus, in Idlib area, in Aleppo. They are everywhere. So it's not a matter of controlling land because there is no invading force or somebody, foreign force coming to invade our land. It's for Syrian people, they live everywhere. They have the revolution in their hearts, minds, and they will revolt. Our first choice was to revolt peacefully, to carry on demonstration. But this regime used extreme violence, pushed the people to carry arms to defend themselves. So revolution will stay. It's not a matter of how many kilometers you control. It's a matter how much will and thought of the revolution stay alive in your brain and heart.
Thank you. Ragida?
Yeah, راغدة درغام الحياة مرحبا. But with Daesh going into Lebanon now a little more active and aggressively than in the last couple of months, do you view this as detrimental to you as the moderate armed opposition to drag Lebanon into it, or do you think it may be helpful because some view it Daesh and Hezbollah will engage in Lebanon and not in Syria? How do you view that?
I think I stated my position very clearly in the Arab League summit last time. We said we as a coalition, we are very keen on the safety and preservation of security in Lebanon and in respecting the rights of the Lebanese people. We stand with them strongly against ISIL, but also we ask the government of Lebanon to have a clear position against the interference of Hezbollah militias inside Syria. Hezbollah militias participating in the killing of the Syrian people. Hezbollah militia, they are part of the Lebanese government itself. So the Lebanese government has obligation towards us, as we are keen to keep and look for the security of Lebanon. At least Lebanon should stay out of this problem, be neutral at the minimum.
Should and what do you think? So they assess the fact that they are now at each other's necks in Lebanon versus then in Syria.
ISIL is not, it's a terrorist organization not controlled by us. It's a threat to us. They came into Lebanon because, as we know, there's some Lebanese in ISIL itself. As we know, there is some British and there's some other nationalities. So you cannot control anymore ISIL. ISIL is not a Syrian problem. It's a regional, international problem, and it has to be dealt with in this respect.
All right here, and then James and Sylvia.
Why is ISIL and their allies being this successful?
Can you introduce yourself?
Halil Moula with Kosovo National Television. Why they are succeeding with volunteers and foreign fighters? Why this many people are going to fight for them, while in the beginning they were oriented to help Syrian people? Is this the vacuum that you I'm talking about opposition in Syria made it, or why is this happening?
I don't know if I got your question correct, but ISIL never were coming to aid and help the Syrian people. Because anybody coming to Syria to enforce their ideology and way of life is not acceptable by the Syrian people. From stage one, we announced our position against ISIL from September 2013. Why people are joining? Majority teenagers, they look into the image of strength, of power, the same as they join in LA any gang. So it has many effects, not only religiously motivated only. It has various factors, some for the image of strength and power as belonging to any gangs, others maybe for the salary they are getting, like in Deir Zor, they pay the single conscript $400, the married one $600 per month. This is a huge amount in Syria these days. Some other people for just to stay alive, for food, and for some others for ammunition and so on. So it has to be dealt within the scope of all these together.
Thank you. James?
Thank you. James Reinl with Al Jazeera. During this presser, I was hoping to get a stronger sense of how you guys would be involved with the US-led train and equip mission and efforts against Islamic State. But you've been asked that a couple of times and you haven't given a totally clear answer, so I'll infer that you don't know yet. If that is the case, perhaps you could explain what you consider to be the dangers to the international operation if you guys aren't involved enough.
No, what I said that we have our own strategy and plan, which has to be consulted with our allies in the coalition and see also their visions and plans and strategy to have a complete one unified strategy for the whole coalition. We as Syrian, we have, as I said, part of our fight is against ISIS and the other part against the regime. So in part we would be with the coalition, and in part we have our own fight and national interest to follow up. We will be responsible. Any operation inside Syria has to be coordinated, led, and done by Syrian forces, not by foreign forces. As you know, there will be no boots on the ground. So we'll have unified command and control center. This is our part. We will provide the vetting process, participate in the vetting process to be more accurate. We'll provide the volunteers who will join this unified fighting force. We will provide intelligence, share intelligence, and get intelligence from other countries. And we'll provide also a complete estimate to what's needed on the side, what type of weapon system, what type of movement, and whatever. But operation, the most important is the unified control and command center inside Syria, which would be completely reorganized in the right way, in military term.
And that's signed and agreed between you and Washington? That is signed and agreed between you and Washington?
This is for sure. We shared the same this morning, and we had a meeting, and we explained these points. I see very well good understanding from the Pentagon that it's a fight not only to be dealt with in military terms, but it has to be dealt politically, economically, socially, and with others. They are open to this concept. They understand it very well, and also they are for the Syrian people to have the lead and the command inside Syria itself.
Where will that be?
In Syria.
Hello.
I think that was the answer.
Yeah.
Sylviane.
I'm Sylviane Zeil from L'Orient Le Jour de Beirut. My question is on the new challenge in Syria, the new wave of terrorism led by Khorasan. How much are you concerned about Khorasan?
In Syria, we became a show window for terrorist organizations. So Khorasan is one of other, terrorist organizations. We are worried about each and every terrorist organizations. We are worried even about our young daughters and the international, safety and security. We want to get these kids away from extremism, away from terrorist organization. So we worry about this organization, same as we worry about ISIS and others.
Thank you, Nabil.
Thank you.
And Matt.
Nabil Abi Saab, Al Hurra TV station. Sorry, I missed the beginning of your press conference. Maybe you talked about it, I don't know. But do you need the US and France and the international coalition in the making now to strike ISIS in Syria, or it's enough for you to get the support that you just talked about the previous question? And do you see any differences in this regard between ISIS and the rest of the terrorist groups, Nusra and the others?
As I said, airstrikes are needed to hit ISIS because ISIS is advancing in very speedy way, especially if you followed up, as I said, in the past week, more than 200 villages. Today I heard they reached 300 villages were emptied of its own people in the north of Syria, in Kobani area. And this created a huge humanitarian crisis in the area. So you cannot sit and wait. You have to act at least to halt the advances of ISIS as soon as possible.
And Nusra and the other groups?
As because you were not here, I explained that
Your attention, please. This is important correspondence that at 2:45 there will be a press
we
briefing
consider
by the
that
Interparliamentary
any
Union on
military
World Conference on
organization
Indigenous
trying to
Peoples.
impose on the Syrian
repeat,
people
at
any
2:45
ideology,
there will be a
belief,
press
religious
briefing by
or
the
not religious, are not in
Interparliamentary
line
Union.
with the revolution.
Sorry about the squawk. We have about 10 more minutes of questions. Matthew, right here.
Hello, my name is Matthew Carpenter. I'm a reporter for Yomiuri Shimbun, a Japanese newspaper. My question is, now that you're going to be taking on both the Assad regime and ISIS at the same time, which do you consider to be the greater threat to your interests?
Both equal threats. The regime is the cause of the existence of ISIS. You cannot deal with ISIS without dealing with the main root cause of the issue. The root cause is the Assad regime. ISIS is equal danger, but eliminating it alone, it will not solve the issue. The Assad regime will give you a newer extremist and terrorist organization. This regime used this tactic since the invasion of Lebanon. Previously, he used it during the American presence in Iraq, and now it's using inside Syria to just hold into power.
So for the immediate future, will your priorities be fighting both equally at the same time, or do you have a...
We have been, it's not a matter of guess. It's a matter which is we are practicing each day. As we speak now, we are fighting the regime in many fronts. One of them is Damascus suburb. And we are standing against ISIL in Aleppo area and Marya, near Marya city. There's our forces fighting with ISIS as we speak now.
All right, thank you.
My name is Anne Carpet from the French International Radio. You talked about the threat of the foreign fighters in the ISIS. Do you have any information of the increase of those foreign fighters? How many there are? Are they increasing, and where they are coming from?
The longer we wait, the threat will grow. The stronger ISIS grow, the more it would be attractive to the young generation, because strength and power is a major attraction point for these guys who are joining this force. It has from all nationalities. There is no specific nationality from the Western that it has the lead in present.
And there was a question. Here. Yes, okay. Benny, I know I saw it somewhere.
Oh, you need the mic. So you were saying
you have
before.
To introduce yourself.
Oh, Benny Avni, Newsweek. You were saying before about the Assad regime and there were reports that Assad initially went easy on ISIS in order to make it, basically the only alternative, so the West will have to choose. Can you document that? Do you have any way of putting a little more flesh on that report and telling us where does that report come from?
This is, you don't need to document it, go back to the news. See how many air attacks conducted in Raqqa city since ISIS took over the city. How many air attacks? You'll find almost none. How many missiles, Scud missiles attack against this area? You'll find none. How many barrel bombs thrown at this area? You'll find none. While in the same period, Aleppo were bombed every day by 10, 20, 30, maybe barrel each day. Scud missiles were fired at Aleppo city and other places, while this area were not targeted. In many battles between the Free Syrian Army and ISIS, the airplanes of the regime comes and bomb the Free Syrian Army and not target the ISIS group. In the recent attack on the Aleppo front, before ISIS goes and invade Akhtarin village, the Syrian regime airplane came, bombarded the area, then after 1 hour, ISIS forces came on the ground and invaded the city. It's very well, you can just search on the net and see the daily report, and you'll see how many air attacks were carried by the Assad regime against the city of Raqqa, for example.
And why?
Because he wanted the ISIS forces to grow, to be more powerful, Free Syrian Army to be weaker. So he will give the image that they have only two alternatives, either extremist organizations, terrorist organization, or Assad regime. And they will choose the less of the two evil, and they were not successful in doing this.
Mr. President, I have a follow-up question, which is that there's been a lot made recently of the fact that within the Obama administration there were different views in the early days about supporting the Syrian rebels. And Leon Panetta was just interviewed. I will mention 60 Minutes. But that, in fact, the question is, there was a great deal of support within the administration except for the president. Now he is talking about not ruling out airstrikes. You obviously have had a lot of contact with the U.S. government, but are you satisfied with the pace now of the change to support you?
Until now, it's in the right direction, at the right pace, but we look for finalized strategy and plans to be finished and finalized as soon as possible, because really you need to make a move on the ground. Again, I say it's not a Syrian threat anymore. It is an international threat which has to be dealt collectively by the whole international community.
All right, we have precious little time, Sang-Wan.
Hello, Sang-Wan from Bloomberg News. I apologize if this was already asked. I think it was, but a follow-up. Can you elaborate a little bit more about your position regarding the role of Iran, considering what Secretary Kerry said on Friday at the Security Council about how there could be a role for Iran to play in the coalition, albeit not on intelligence sharing, et cetera. Do you disagree that Iran should play any role at all, that it should not be included in any discussions regarding how to combat ISIL and steps forward on Syria?
Iran has the greatest role to play. It has to put an end to its participation in killing the Syrian people. It has put an end to its partnership with the Assad regime. Iranian militias are in Syria. They are participating in committing war crimes against Syrian people. So the best way they can participate is first to put an end to their own active participation in killing the Syrian people.
I think last question.
Yes, my name is Frances Barakal. I'm with the Mainichi Shimbun, a Japanese national daily newspaper. My question is, a lot of Western countries have been emphasizing the need to discredit ISIL's brand of Islamic religion as an important part, but I'm not seeing this very much stressed by Arabic Muslim countries. Do you believe that this is a true priority, or is it mostly as seen from the West that this is a priority? Thank you.
I think the the worst thing that happened to Islam is organizations such as ISIS. Islam really has nothing to do with their philosophy, with their way of conducting their daily practices. These people, they give bad image to Islam itself. Islam has grown to be one of the greatest religions in the world based on the teaching or based on the practice of Muslims. Like in East Asia, Islam didn't come using power or using the sword. It came through businessmen, Muslim businessmen going there, practicing their religion. They saw how good they are, how human they are, so they converted into Islam. Now we are in an open world. There's no need to force religion on anyone. You could have a satellite channel, nobody block your way. You can come to any country and preach your religion and convince the people of it. So these guys, totally wrong. We are against them. Many clerks in the Muslim world, they educate other Muslims about them. And we encourage more and more clerics and many institutions, Islamic institutions like Al-Azhar in Egypt, like in Al-Haram al-Sharif in Saudi Arabia, to play more active role. Also the Islamic World Islamic Organization, they should have more active programs into fighting the thoughts and ideas and ideologies of these groups.
Answer individual questions afterward. Thank you for coming on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association.